Long time no see. Well, technically, not too much on your end. I haven't talked into a camera and done research for something like this since mid-January. I've spent the time from that point till now editing what is now the Trico series that's all uploaded and nicely organized if you go on my channel's homepage. I am now letting myself have the camera be in frame. I tried before and that made an audio editing disaster, so I think I'm just gonna have to have the microphone in the set so I get good audio quality. And a different chair. Found it in the trash, cleaned it out. It kind of has the same bulkiness as like those gamer chairs, but it's a little more like elegant. It's like wood, and that's why I like it. So we're approaching a year since the BICO letter was sent out and subsequently signed and or responded to within the 2-week period that they requested. Now the actual date is June 17th, and I don't plan on uploading it that late because I don't want too much of a gap of time between when I finish this. We'll finish the Trico series and when I upload this, but we're approaching the year. We're within the month that it's going to be a year. So I thought we would go back just a bit and see if anything's actually changed. I guess Too Long didn't want to watch. Not really. I mean, the schools implemented their timelines, they changed their anti-racism page, but checking through all the Instagrams and all the Twitters of all the accounts that were active during the strike, there wasn't really much added. If anything, some of them privated their material, which makes me a little inquisitive of what's going on, but not enough. Not like enough people. It's not enough, but like not enough accounts actually do that. Just one of the main ones I saw, the Bryn Mawr Strike Collective one, which I find very interesting. Although all of their activities is there in the what we will soon see is the updated archive. So I guess technically, whether privated or not, all of their what is the phrase? Trash is there to air out, something like that. There is one thing I found that we'll look into that I will have like a thought scenario surrounding. However, it is not something that's directly related to both the strikes or even Haverford, Bryn Mawr, or Swarthmore. Right now, well, we're actually only looking at Bryn Mawr and Swarthmore, but there is some stuff to it, so that's why we're gonna look at it. So here's Bryn Mawr's page. This was not here. It had like a in working or in progress kind of page for as long as I can remember when I kept checking. But as you look, there's teach-ins, it's institutional action accountability, priorities and action, engaging college histories. I don't know why that's pluraled. Resources for the campus, reports and policies, and campus partnership for equity and anti-racism. CPAIR! Not much really in those that would be a surprise to see if you've been kind of like following this stuff for a while. So Haverford's hasn't had much of a change from the few times that I checked during the school year, or my school year because I'm a student, but during the spring semester of 2021. They did complete their student archive, which is right here, which I find really interesting in comparison to Bryn Mawr's, which is in the actual digital libraries connection. Now, I don't know how to search through these, because, I mean, despite all of the library literacy classes I've had to take throughout my school, just in general, since, like, I joined public school, I'm still a little weary, but this popped up actually just from Google, which is surprising, because sometimes I would think that unless you have a login, you can't go too deep. But the Bryn Mawr Strike Collective, their stuff, all of it, basically what I have in my own archive is up here. I don't know if the lock means I can't look at it, but like, it's there, on broad daylight. What I find interesting is how like Bryn Mawr took it and made it like really aesthetically pleasing, and then Haverford just like smacks it on the page. The atmospheres between Bryn Mawr and Swarthmore did have those kind of like fun parallels to it, so I'm not surprised it's how I'm not surprised it's how I'm interpreting it, but I don't know if that was purposeful. I doubt it, but there's that. I couldn't find anything for Swarthmore. I looked up Swarthmore, looked up all the keywords I could. I just found a bunch of individual statements from different departments that have been around since the uprising of last summer. So there's not really much for me to show in those areas. But there's one thing I do want to look at. and we're going to start with their Instagram. So HC Salt, the actual Instagram account, has been around, I believe, since last summer, or it kind of popped up maybe a little before the strike started. And as you see, it's Students for Abolition, Liberation, and Transformation is a student-led prison abolitionist group at Haverford College, formerly Rethink Incarceration. So actually, they could have been around for longer than I think, but the HC Salt Instagram and their posts were only really here since last summer or before the strike happened. Now, I didn't really cover them because they only had 3 Instagram posts during the duration of I Was Registered and during the strike. I mean, they're interesting of themselves if you want to look at this one. Abolish the police means abolish the university. A world without policing and prisons is necessarily a world without the university. What can grow from the ashes of an anti-black, settler, colonial, and extractive institution like Haverford College? What can bloom? I would think very intelligent individuals who find wonderful ideas in the university, though that's not to say that it's worth this criticism of the, I guess, diversity of intellectual fields. I don't really know intellectual thinkers, but sometimes that brings in a more political aspect. Either way, I would say that not everyone who of that skin color, or even of the broader minority status individuals, have that opinion of the university must be abolished because of the roots it came from. However, what I found interesting that I wanted to cover in here is this. Email action. The BICO is complicit in the theft and exploitation of Tree and Delicia's Africa's remains. Find email addresses and a sample message to demand justice at blank. So what they're referencing here with the individuals of Tree and Delicia's Africa's remains is the MOVE bombing that happened in the 1980s in Pennsylvania. It's a really, I want to say interesting, but I don't mean that derogatory at all, in the sense it's interesting in the governments and the state government's interactions with a group of people of certain types of beliefs. Not all of them even like inherently political. Some were even more just like, I guess like environmental, it can be political, but there was like a spiritual motive and everything. And that's what I mean by it's a very interesting event. There is a documentary out about it. I believe you got to pay for it. I couldn't find it, but that's on the table. So I'm going to read this article. The remains of children killed in MOVE bombings sat in a box at Penn State Museum for decades. So I'm just going to read the beginning of this one because I do want to lay out the history and then add a little bit of information, and then we're actually going to read why this is related to Bryn Mawr and Haverford specifically, not just by that Instagram post. No one seems to be sure what happened to a set of remains thought to be 2 children killed in the 1985 MOVE bombing. For decades, the bones were kept at the University of Pennsylvania Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology. A Penn Museum spokesperson said the remains have since been transferred to the care of researchers at Princeton, but an administrator at the New Jersey University was uncertain of their whereabouts. After the story was published, a spokesperson said Princeton does not have them. The indifferent treatment of the remains is not new. At Penn, according to people with first-hand knowledge, they were not kept in climate-controlled storage. They were kept in a cardboard box on a shelf. Mike Africa Jr., a current member of the MOVE organization, was shocked and disturbed by the news that his relatives had been denied a resting place. They were bombed and burned alive, Africa Jr. said, and now you want to keep their bones. Princeton Anthropology Department Chair Carola Rouse wasn't sure of the remains' current location. Reached by phone, she said they might be in a lab run by Alan Mann, a now retired professor who has been studying them with Janet M., I can't pronounce that last name, curated of Penn Museum's Physical Anthropology section. According to both universities, Mann was given custody of the remains by the Philadelphia Medical Examiner's Office in the 1980s when he analyzed them at the city's request. At the time, he worked at Penn. When Mann transferred to Princeton in 2001, he reportedly took the bones with him. I don't know exactly what's in that room, Rouse said about Mann's Princeton lab, where he collaborated with M. Nobody knows what's in that lab but them. Rouse lived in Philadelphia, mixing up my P states, when the bombing happened. She added, I'm very aware of the profoundness of the MOVE thing, but nobody has been asking about the MOVE remains, she said. There's no conspiracy here. It's just that this is now just becoming a thing. Six adults and 5 children lost their lives during the 1985 attack on the Osage Avenue MOVE compound. Again, I can't pronounce street names either. Last year, city lawmakers formally apologized for the incident, which shocked the nation when Philadelphia dropped a bomb on its own citizens, destroying an entire block in the process. None of the officials in charge at the time ended up facing consequences. As part of its work unpacking what had gone wrong, the MOVE Philadelphia Special Investigations Commission hired a renowned forensic scientist to examine the human remains found in the rubble. Soon after the bombing, he identified some of the bones as being from the 14-year-old victim known as Tree and the 12-year-old victim known as Delisha. According to documents exchanged by officials at the time, there is some uncertainty about that finding, so the city enlisted Mann to double-check. Mann was assisted by M, according to city records, who was a Penn State student at the time. 30 years later, as a Penn Museum curator, she began to reanalyze the remains. With new technology available in the museum's lab, keeper and associate curator of the physical anthropology section, Dr. Janet M. led continued investigations to confirm the person's identity in 2016 to 2019, said UPenn spokesperson Jill DeSanto via email. The remains were returned to the care and stewardship of Dr. Mann at Princeton University. But Mann received emerit status from Princeton in 2015 and has not officially worked at the university for years. M is no longer affiliated with Princeton, leaving the stewardship of the remains an open question. Based on our initial investigation, wrote spokesperson Michael Hotchkiss, who said the article spurred an immediate search, we can confirm that no remains of the victim of the MOVE bombing are being housed at Princeton University. So, if you can kind of sense what the whole thing was talking about, this incident happened, gigantic incident happened, and then someone was hired by the state to investigate the bones to be able to return them, and I believe, according to another article I read, that most of it that they could identify was returned, or there was some kind of symbolic funeral, but there was, I guess, these bones that weren't able to be identified, and so they were given back to him for a second investigation. And then there was a 30-year period where these bones sat in a box, and then there was this reinvestigation period between 2016 and 2019 by his apprentice that was a student at the time, and then after that, in 2019, they were returned to Princeton, presumably. Princeton does not have them. They don't have any sort of input from both Dr. Mann or Dr. M in this. So, I think Dr. Janet. So, there is legit disgust in that situation of like, what the hell happened? Now, my instinct is not to ask for firing or anything like that because there's so much we don't know about where the bones are, for one, and two, this 30-year period, and three, both these people are still alive and can be interviewed, and seeing how we've had such a emphasis on experiential knowledge and the importance of a spoken story, I would think we would want to be able to talk to these people to see what happened. Now, the reason this was found out was because on a website called Coursera, which is a place you can get semi-free learning, they kind of have changed their system where they used to be you do a course and then you pay to get the certificate, but now I think there's some courses you have to pay for to even get access to. But there was a Coursera course, which has now been deleted. So it was deleted because it was found that, I believe, well, it's not even presumably, because I will show you. This is an archived picture of this website, which is Losing Personhood, Move, a Case Study. So we'll read the description and then the description of the other thing. So this says, forensic anthropology involves medico-legal cases where human remains have lost personhood. An individual cannot be identified due to decomposition or deconstruction of unique personal features. We will learn techniques that biological anthropologists apply to these cases to identify certain social attributes. We will also blend both biological and social anthropology to analyze human variation as well-being in urban settings. This course will investigate and discuss the various techniques of analysis that biological anthropologists can apply to forensic cases. Topics includes human osteology, the recovery of bodies, the analysis of life history, the reconstruction of causes of death, and various case studies where anthropologists have contributed significantly to solving forensic cases. Discussions will include the limitations of forensic anthropology and the application of DNA recovery to skeletal/mummified materials. This is a description specifically for the section about the MOVE victim, which states, this week introduces the field of forensic anthropology with a case study of the bombing of the MOVE community. Many human remains were burned and thus personhood was lost. This is more than just a forensic anthropology case study. There were very serious issues and social and political consequences of the event that led to the assault on the Philadelphia neighborhood and their outcome in a confrontation with law enforcement agencies. Now, what we are getting into now, if we're going to disregard the sketchy history that surrounds the fact of why they still had these bones that probably should have been reinvestigated 30 years prior, and that's where I agree with what we were going to read, which is a attempted petition or a attempted, I guess, not even strike, but just making awareness to this issue, the investigation of human bones from a tragedy and the ethics behind that is something that is brought up by the MOVE organization. I believe that's their official title. Because in investigating these bones, she was holding them, she was talking about the texture, she described it in certain manners that I guess can be identified as insensitive, especially in this case with the whole situation of these bones. What I've inferred in this instance is that this weird 3-year period where after this 30-year hiatus of not investigating these bones, they decided to take these bones, reinvestigate them, were able to firmly identify their place due to new technology that may not have been available 30 years ago, and then made a course surrounding it, thus afterwards returning it presumably to Princeton, which according to these articles, Princeton doesn't even have it. So that's a little bit more inferred because none of them really directly talk about the Coursera thing, bringing up the fact and the awareness that these bones were still held at Princeton when there was some information told that they don't actually have these bones, and then, well, technically they had to do a reanalysis 30 years ago, but they technically didn't for reasons that nobody really knows, and then now they did it in this 3-year period because they had new technology. It's a mess. It's a sticky mess. So, this sticky mess of these 2 universities in Pennsylvania was taken up by both the MOVE organization and probably other smaller organizations from there, and one of them was some Bryn Mawr organizations that wanted to have Haverford and Bryn Mawr both support the deplatforming of the professor and all that other stuff. Well, I don't know if it's a professor or a researcher in this case, but this person, Dr. Janet, along with admitting their own faults because Dr. Janet had some affiliation with Bryn Mawr and Haverford as a teacher and as an affiliate in certain cases. So, there's 2 documents. They're basically similar, but one of them is a little more harsher in words, and I want to read it. So we're going to read the petition that was linked in that one Instagram post. Don't call it an article. That's how you get boomerified. Return the remains of Tree and Delisha Africa now. Call on the Buy Code to support the MOVE family. The remains they're talking about in all these articles have been reiterated that we don't know where they are. They can't be returned if the situation's so icky that we don't know where they landed. Princeton doesn't have them. This Dr. Janet person doesn't have them. Dr. Mann probably doesn't have them. The Philadelphia State College, University, whatever, doesn't have them. That's already the first flaw with this, from what I've gathered, but let's go on. On May 13th, 1985, the Philadelphia Police Department dropped 2 firebombs on the MOVE organization's residential home and headquarters in the heart of West Philadelphia on Oswego Avenue. The PPD, fire department, and city government made the decision to let the fire burn, murdering 11 members of the Africa family, 6 adults and 5 children, including 14-year-old Tree Africa and 12-year-old Delisha Africa, and destroyed 65 homes. As reported by Abdul Ali Muhammad in April 2021, the bones of Tree and Delisha Africa have been held captive by Princeton University at the University of Pennsylvania since shortly after the bombing in 1985. That's mostly true. As I just stated, there's this weird period where after the request for a second analysis, Dr. Mann just had these bones. There could have been maybe hey, I don't have the technology, I'm going to hold on to these till I do, which we don't know because no one's talking about wanting to interview these people, at least in these few articles that I've read. So, let's go on. Bryn Mawr College is directly implicated in this heinous desecration of black children's remains. Janet M., who alongside Alan Mann was one of the primary academics responsible for this atrocity, was an anthropology professor at Bryn Mawr for at least a decade, while also a member of the Penn Museum staff. When M. began working at Bryn Mawr, she had already worked with Mann to study and desecrate Tree and Delisha's already identified remains, which MOVE and their Africa family were led to believe had been buried at their funeral in 1985. There's another one where I can't say if it's wrong or right, because the bones that they were able to identify were returned, according to I think even just the the article on the MOVE organization's websites. Now, the specific sentence already identified remains can't be held here, seeing how all these other articles, not even the one I just read, stated that there was some that there was second guessings of. And then the question is, why was there this 30-year period of silence from 1985 to 2015 where that second investigation didn't happen? So, I will continue on reading this. Haverford students have taken classes with Janet M., and alumnus have continued to praise her even in the wake of these revelations about her role in this atrocity. Bryn Mawr graduate students have trained with M. as recently as 2017. Bryn Mawr students have used bones in the Morton College collection for independent research, according to the Penn Museum's website. In addition to the bones of Tree and Delisha, the Morton collection holds the stolen remains of black people who were enslaved in the U.S. and Cuba and of countless black Philadelphians. I don't know about the last category, but actually those 2 articles they have in here that are hyperlinked are articles talking about the Penn Museum both apologizing and saying they're going to go through actions to return these bones to their proper place. The first article is that apology. The second one is talking about how there was a research group who found out about this reality of these bones, which almost defeats the purpose of them putting them there, because they're putting articles there that are saying, hey, we recognize our wrong, and this wrongness is something that you also feel is wrong, so we're in this agreement, and we're actually going through with this. But that, at least in this thing, is not listed of they believe it's wrong, so we're going to do this thing. We at the BICO Ignite Collective, Bryn Mawr Black Students Liberatory Collective, Haverford Students for Abolition, Liberation, and Transformation, and the BICO Communists are calling on the students, alumni, faculty, and administration of Bryn Mawr and Haverford College to support the demands of the Africa family on the University of Pennsylvania for the immediate return of the remains of Delisha Africa and Triafrica to the Move family, which no one can do because they're lost somewhere. An immediate apology by the University of Pennsylvania, Princeton University, and the Penn Museum and Coursera to the current MOVE organization and the Black community of Philadelphia for this racist and abhorrent behavior. So they're asking for a virtue signal, even though Coursera removed the people who, I'm mixing up Princeton and Pennsylvania University, but they removed the course from the Coursera. It is no longer available unless you were going on an archive thing, but even then the videos are corrupted. Financial reparations to the Africa family for the continued harm and trauma caused by Princeton University and the University of Pennsylvania, the Penn Museum, and Coursera for the profits made by the use of our relatives as teaching tools and research objects. That's also a one that has sketchy ground because, again, there was a second analysis called for those bones, weird 30-year period, and then there was the second analysis done 30 years later, and they decided to use that analysis for an educational opportunity because, from what I understand, when you're an educator or a scientist, most times if you're connected with academia, you're going to train other students. You're going to use the things you're researching as teaching material. So even if the second analysis was done in 1985, I would not be surprised if they were to have students in that situation to both document the process and help with it, along with using what they did in that 1985 second analysis, presuming if we were in a utopian scenario where, well, they would say utopian scenario, meaning this bombing didn't happen, but a better scenario in this timeline where sadly this atrocity happened. There would probably have been students involved in this research, which just would make the demand for reparations because of the implicit profits of tuition used or the more direct profits of Coursera certificates asked for in the situation more mucky. The immediate removal of all online content in which these remains are used, which that's been done. The termination of Janet M. for her role as curator of the Penn Museum and the faculty in the Department of Anthropology. I don't know why you want to terminate a professor who you haven't interviewed and seen not only just their side of the story, but what happened. In the sense of, like, she had direct contact with these bones. She can tell you at least what she knows about why they were kept in a box and all these things. If you're just going to terminate her status and shun her and assume complete guilt, then one, I'm not going to fully support your movement for this if you believe in completely deplatforming someone just because of the perceived actions they did, when they could have actually had someone higher up gaslighting them about what to do. This could have been more the university's fault than hers. We don't know. I don't know. I'm not accusing the university. I'm saying it's a different scenario where that could be the case. I guess there's a little bit of accusation, but in this case, I don't even have enough to make a firm accusation of that kind. The creation of a transparent public investigation led by a MOVE-approved investigator and funded by the universities into how these remains ended up in the museum's possession over the past 35 years. That I can mostly support. The MOVE-approved kind of is a little weird because I think you would just want someone who's like extremely qualified in investigations to do this, which I think the university can be fully capable of choosing. I'm not going to read the last paragraph because it's what you would expect. I will say, though, the section there listed in the 2020 open letter of the how there was a demand listed about Bryn Mawr in the BICO open letter that asks them to, like, why don't we want you to research into the own artifacts we have, because a lot of them either list like unknown or from the specific family, and there's been ties of this family stealing these artifacts. And then Kim Cassidy replies to that letter and says, we agree with you, we're going to work further on this, and we're going to work with who we have in our Africana studies, because they don't have an Africana study department, but they have Africana studies classes. They said we're going to work with them more to try to get people, or to use people already in our school to try to figure out where these things come from, because we want to know where they come from. So I don't know why they list that, because well, here we go. And how they came to the college possession with the ultimate goal of reparation. I took a class in my university where the professor did talk about like the problematic nature of museums and saying how like all museums, no matter if they were like Western colonialized or not, should return their objects. And one, I feel like that comes from a place of like almost like being privileged, because like there was, I would think, just like not in just olden times, but like a few, not even a few hundred. I can't even. War has been a thing, conquering's been a thing. You could say that the Western conquering was completely different in its huge casing and all these displaying, but there's even before then, I would believe that when wars happen, there would be some kind of taking of something to be like, hey, look at what we've gotten, and the fact that we're in a point where we're like, that's wrong, I can't believe we did that, we want to return this stuff, I think shows how much more softer we're getting. And I don't mean that in like a negative or a positive manner, but like the fact that we can ask for that and people in academia are taking it seriously. I don't even have like a caveat to that. I was gonna say we should be happy for that, but like I don't know, the ultimate tearing down of every institution we have that I feel is underlying this, in the first start with the museums, within this guise of reparation and virtue signal apologizing, it kind of freaks me out a little bit. So in the bottom it says, this petition is indebted to the language and demands of the statement made by the SALT on the manor. So that's the one I kind of want to look at really quick, because they're a little more blunt. Reparations, investigation now. Holding the BICO accountable for its complicity in the theft of MOVE children's remains. On April 21st, 2021, reporter Abduli Ali Muhammad revealed that bones of children murdered by the Philadelphia Police Department in the 1985 bombing of the MOVE house on Osage Avenue, I've pronounced that street 3 different times now, has been held hostage by the University of Pennsylvania and Princeton University for decades. The bones of Tree and Delisha Africa, many of whose family members are still alive and impacted by their deaths every day, were stolen without consent, leave in cardboard boxes, and used as a case study for classes rather than returned to their community and loved ones. That is full of implications and assumptions. So the first one, I mean, impacted by deaths every day. Yes, of course. That's just an obvious fact of what happens when a tragedy happens and you're still alive and people aren't. Were stolen without consent. That's unclear. What are you referencing there? Because they were given investigation rights for Dr. Mann to have, and then there was a second analysis asked for, which then is the sketchy behavior of 30 years of silence. But then the second analysis did happen in this 3-year period by his apprentice, and then presumably the bones were returned to Dr. Mann to then do as he pleased with it, which is hopefully to return to the people. But that last phrasing of what I just said and where the bones are now is the questionable part. And the kept in cardboard boxes, that is true. That is also really sketchy. And used for a case study for classes rather than return to the community and loved ones. That goes back to what I was mentioning of the fact that I think even if the second analysis did happen right in 1985 or 1986, I'm mixing up the dates, my apologies. The investigation second analysis would probably also have been done by other students and apprentices, and probably would have been documented for class purposes in the future. Because whether a tragedy is state oriented or happened a few hundred years ago by just 2 groups of people having it out, there's usually documentation that happens so that they can teach about it to people who want to go into fields, so that when these types of events happen, because I sadly think they're just going to happen and I just hope they dissipate and aren't state caused, they have people to investigate for it. So where was I? Jenna M., Alan Mann, their colleagues, and the institutions that signed their paychecks have done unspeakable violence and denied these black children peace even in death. They did return the identified bones, though, according to even the MOVE statement. There's just pieces that weren't, which again is still sketchy material. Bryn Mawr and Haverford are always eager to advise their connections with the University of Pennsylvania when it comes to admissions, but when Black Philadelphians voices the violence that Penn and its professors continue to inflict on their community, suddenly Bryn Mawr and Haverford want to pretend they are innocent members of the Quaker Consortium. Pretend they are innocent. Members of the Quaker Consortium have exchanged faculty, students, and plunder for decades. Actually, I will go back a sentence. So, this letter was sent out probably within the week after or the week of the April 21st thing, and they're immediately assuming the feelings of Haverford and Bryn Mawr, even though they've not made statements on the matter, nor can I sadly assume the behavior of this group of people going to the administration and talking with them about it in some sort of semi-diplomatic manner. I will give them that looseness. From the behavior I saw in the strikes and knowing that there probably is some overlap with the people involved, I don't know if I can give that assumption of behavior. I could be wrong. I'm open to being wrong, but I don't think I can give that assumption in this. Members, oh no, I already said that. Janet M. was an anthropology professor at Bryn Mawr for over a decade in the 1990s and early 2000s, and Haverford and Bryn Mawr students have taken her classes ever since she joined Penn's faculty. Bryn Mawr students have done research at the Morton Consortium, which is also, we already saw that one, I already commented on that. The kidnapping of the moved children's bones by the University of Pennsylvania, in which Bryn Mawr and Haverford were complicit, if not directly involved, is a direct extension of the deadly inferno that the Philadelphia police unleashed on the African Family and Move organization in 1985. There is no possibility for justice in this situation. There is nothing that can bring these children back to life or return the years of grieving to their family members. However, the institution involved must be held accountable. I've always had a weird feeling with that whole definition of justice, because if you're saying that justice is that it doesn't happen, I can stand for that, but not allowing yourself to acknowledge that the tragedy happened while still holding firm disagreement of why it happened, and not allowing for the sake of justice to still prevail despite justice not existing in its pure form in the first place because of this event, allows for so much resentment and negative feelings to just grab on to your good intention of wanting this to be better. So, the rest of this we've already read. Now, when I said now, I read the now in caps. This is all I kind of have of, like, what are the students doing now? What have they been doing? This is the only thing they've done. And it's kind of poetic that they kind of were silent from December till now, or at least according to Instagram posts and things I've read that I've been able to get my hands on. The only reason I am reading this was for a kind of thought experiment, because I was thinking to myself, I'm like, well, this is just common behavior we've seen of guilt by association, asking for virtuous seamless behavior even though they claim that that's performative, but not performative when they ask for it, and taking a situation that, in this one, it is blatantly complicated in that what happened in this 30-year period, where are the bones? Those are two clear questions. There's probably a lot tied into it of what's going on with it. And using that to then tie the school into it and get that sword going to then be used it to whack against them later on, which is kind of what I want to get into, of that if any future student organization wants to go against the colleges again, whether that's Bryn Mawr, Haverford, Swarthmore, or all three of them all at once, they will use this. If Haverford and Bryn Mawr do not respond in the proper manner that these organizers are asking for, and organizers different from the past ones, because even though there's presumably some overlap, because one of the organizations listed in here was an organization that did help or was the leaders of the strike for Bryn Mawr, this can be used to initiate another strike or initiate something else, because as they did with the first strikes, they said it's not technically about Wendy's email. It's about the bigger picture. It's not about the way you responded to your complicity in the horrendous treatment of these bones of these black children. It's the bigger picture. It's the institution. It's the college. I know the script by now, or at least most of it. However, beyond this, and updating their wonderful websites and their little bureaucratic processes and adding all the little groups in the little college, nothing much. The young adults got their energy out for a collective month, but mostly just like week and a half span for each. And then they just kind of quieted down, gossiped in their dorm rooms. This is too long. I'm gonna stop talking. There's the update. That's what's been going on with the Trico. I know I'm not gonna be done with this because something's gonna come up later, but you know what? No, something might. I'm not gonna jinx that, but that's it. That's it.